Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Zeynep Gökçe. A deadly explosion in New Delhi that killed over a dozen people has triggered more than fear in the Indian capital. It has ignited a diplomatic storm with Türkiye. Within hours, segments of India's media launched a campaign linking Ankara to the attack. Türkiye swiftly rejected the accusations as malicious disinformation, warning that such reports could damage relations between the two countries. This latest spat did not come out of nowhere. Strains between New Delhi and Ankara have been building for years. Türkiye has openly supported Islamabad during recent clashes between India and Pakistan. Those tensions have increasingly spilled into the public sphere. They've ranged from social media campaigns urging boycotts of Turkish products to Indian media suggesting that a missile test had Türkiye directly in its crosshairs. And while the Indian government has not formally accused Türkiye of any involvement in the New Delhi blast, its silence has not gone unnoticed. Could this dispute harden into something far more damaging, reshaping the course of India-Türkiye ties? For more, I'm joined from Ankara by Ömeya Anis, Assistant Professor at Ankara Yıldırım Beyazıt University. From Islamabad, Hannan Hüseyin, Senior Expert at Initiate Futures. And from Istanbul, Mehmet Çelik, Editorial Coordinator at Daily Sabah. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining me. Now, India and Türkiye have had tensions before, whether it's over Kashmir or Türkiye's deep defense ties with Pakistan. So, Ömeya, where does this latest incident fit into the broader history of tensions between the two countries?
Thank you very much for having me on your show. Let me say that India and Turkey, they represent two different strategic and political contexts in their international relations. They have so many mismatches in their international and regional interests. They belong to different camps in the Cold War. They had many conflict of interest and contradictions in their foreign policy for a very long time. And during the time of Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi in India and President Özel in Turkey, they had found some sort of reconciliation by agreeing on some mutual interest. However, if we look at the recent conflicts between India and Pakistan, and the subsequent conflict between India and Turkey, which I should say is very unfortunate. There are misreadings, I should say, I'm using this term, misreading, in India and in Turkey about each other's role in the region. So in India, during this war about the terrorist attack in Kashmir, Indians, especially the media section in India, had seen that Turkey's role in supporting Pakistan has been quite exceptional. And to the extent that Turkey was seen as a party in the conflict, which may not be completely true, may not be, I have seen Turkish statements who have clarified that they are not a party in the conflict and they have tried to stay away, officially at least. However, the reading in Ankara about Pakistan, about India is, in my understanding, is very much clear. Turkey has clear choices. Turkey has clear preferences. And in that preference, I suppose that India and Pakistan are two different countries, and India is not an immediate strategic priority for Ankara. As a result, the reading in New Delhi is also matching the same, I should say, emotion, and there is so much media frenzy, media reaction against Turkey's perception of India and Pakistan relations. So at the same time, I would also say that there is an abnormal situation in India and Turkey relations. There is complete breakdown of mutual bilateral dialogue, not just a diplomatic dialogue. At the same time, there is no civil society dialogue. There is no active, vibrant discussions between the two societies. I would say that Indians and Pakistan and Turkish people, they know about each other very limited things. There is no serious effort to understand each other's perspective, and that is why I call it as an abnormal situation between the two countries. And within this abnormal condition, I think that the tension, like India and Pakistan, have become a major source of misunderstanding and misperception. Whether Turkey and India are trying to reach out to each other and to find some solution and find some understanding, I think it is too early to think about that and to assess that there is a serious effort to reconcile. So this is the state
Yes.
of affair as of now.
Yes, so you're saying the Indian media has a habit of viewing Türkiye from the lens of Pakistan. And if we come back to these media claims, it also includes mainstream media. Even India Today, the Economic Times, and then there's Business Today that implied foreign handlers were codenamed Pakistan and Türkiye, as in a way to show the two countries as partners in crime. But the Indian government hasn't made any such announcement of Turkish, of Pakistani involvement. So, Hanan, what explains this disconnect between the Indian government and Indian media? And in such cases, what kind of proof is needed for such allegations to be taken seriously?
To answer your question specifically, look, from the government point of view, in order to make a claim of this magnitude, putting up an official statement would mean an official acknowledgement and ownership about the claims that have been made, and an endorsement from the top that the Indian state stands behind these claims as evidence. And I think the fact that we haven't seen that kind of a statement come forward kind of corroborates Turkey's view that this is largely disinformation campaign being handled by certain media outlets, which has no basis in fact. So I think by letting these outlets spread this kind of narrative about global terror, about linking these handlers to Pakistan and Turkey. And of course, it's important to inform your audience as well that a couple of these handlers, according to some of these news outlets and the sources that they quote, were also contradicted within these media outlets, saying that there's possibility that these handlers might be of the same origin. So I think this kind of narrative coming forward, I think a more categorical rejection from the Indian side would have sent a decisive signal that India is in a position to kind of prevent bilateral ties from being swayed by this disinformation campaign. But the fact that we haven't seen such a statement come forward is basically, I think, a bit of a weak spot on India's point, where you have media narratives kind of targeting a state based on flimsy evidence and these tall claims about terrorism and global terror and plotting. But the state's responsibility to kind of put fact away from disinformation is something that the Indian media and the government has been, less inclined toward.
Yes, and Turkey rejected these claims, obviously. Its Center for Combating Disinformation made the announcement on its social media accounts, and I actually want to read a part of that statement. It says the deliberate reports in certain Indian media outlets claiming that Turkey is linked to terrorist acts in India and provides logistical, diplomatic and financial support to terrorist groups are part of a malicious disinformation campaign aimed at damaging bilateral relations between the two countries. Now, Mehmet, is this type of public rebuttal and condemnation normal? How serious is Turkey taking these claims, and could either side escalate this already fragile situation?
Well, I mean, Turkey wouldn't take these serious in the sense that these allegations are baseless, because Turkey has been a country that basically stands against any sort of terrorism, regardless of the roots and the source in the international community, in the international arena. But if I make an intervention about the previous two questions you had, just very briefly, with regards to Indian media, I think the sensationalism is the style of Indian media, and this is what they have used as a style. But when it is fueled by very far-right tendencies and far-right nationalism, I think it finds no direction, and it is acting as a bomb that could explode anywhere at any time without a very purposeful aim. But when the government is not actually stopping that sensationalism against a country that could possibly have good relations, I think then we see that parallels between the government's position as well as the media's stance against Turkey. With regards to India-Turkey relations, if I can make a very brief intervention, I think the analysis should be made at 3 different levels. One is the bilateral level. 2, Turkey-India relations with taking into consideration Pakistan and Kashmir. And 3, India's positioning itself internationally at a camp that is much different than Turkey and the region itself. When we look at South Caucasus, for example, India was on an opposite end. And when we look at the Middle East, even India-Israel relations vis-a-vis Turkey is at a rivalry. When we look at bilateral relations, however, when there is a red line by the Indian side that always brings forward the Kashmir issue or Turkey's ties with Pakistan, then it's very difficult to move forward the ties bilaterally. When we look at Turkey's ties with the United States, when we look at Turkey's ties with Russia, even with the EU, there were at many times many different opinions and very strong positions that opposed one another with regards to terrorism, for example. And I mean what I mean is PKK terrorism. The U.S. supported YPG in Syria, but still that relationship always continued. Russia and Turkey were at opposing sides in Syria, but that pragmatism was still there in relations. I think this is a misreading by India that they missed that opportunity in terms of pragmatism and building relations with Turkey and reading Turkey's influence regionally and internationally from a different perspective that basically puts them on a different pole. And I think from the Indian side, this is a missed opportunity, let alone a misreading.
Yes, and this isn't the first time Indian media coverage on Turkey has raised eyebrows. Back in August, some outlets reported that New Delhi's new Agni 5 ICBM could strike targets from China all the way to Turkey. Now, Ömer, why did India suggest Turkey is within its range? Was that meant as a signal or a threat?
I would like to say here that we must differentiate between what is happening in the media and what is the mainstream thinking within India's diplomacy and state politics. As far as my understanding about the state politics, there is complete clarity about Turkey and its importance in the region and in global politics. And I don't think at all, and I have seen people who have clearly rejected such ideas that India has any kind of defense capabilities in which Turkey is being kept in mind, including there were some previous some discussions like that. So I think that that is completely clear that India does not look at Turkey as an enemy country. So officially, I mean at the state politics level. But in media, because of this India and Pakistan conflict, I think that the media discussions have gone beyond, as my previous friend has said, sensationalism has come in. What is the main issue here I would like to highlight is that there is a shift, there is a change in Turkish perception and Turkish understanding of South Asian politics. That is, I would say that yes, there is a conflict between India and Pakistan. There is an issue of Jammu and Kashmir, which has to be resolved. However, the Turkish perception and prescription, of course, to resolve these issues are completely different from many other countries of the region and India, of course. So the prescriptions which are coming from Ankara and which have become gradually so assertive has, I think that India has become quite worried about Ankara's postures about these assertions. And New Delhi does not see Ankara as a supporting, as a facilitator partner in these type of discussions. I think that there is a need for some sort of softening in Ankara's approach about these South Asian conflicts. Of course, these conflicts has to be resolved, but there should be some regional mechanism, and I think that there is a need to recognize that bilateral forums are going to be the best forums to resolve such issues, and the best Ankara could contribute. And of course, there is limited capability in Ankara to play a role in such conflicts, not just in Jammu and Kashmir, but any conflict in the world. So based on the limitations which Ankara does have in such conflicts, I think that there is a possibility for Ankara to review its role in the conflict and its role in helping the two countries to find a solution. I think that
Yes.
such a softened position could be quite helpful.
Yeah, so I want to go back to the Delhi attacks. Hanan, so Indian authorities are investigating the attacks under the anti-terrorism law. So how could this shape the course of the investigation? And also, what the Indian government's approach to the attacks, how much of it is shaped by its internal affairs?
Well, a lot of it is shaped by internal affairs. First of all, there's been a lot of pressure on Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi after the May strikes about being hard on terrorism. And even though this is being investigated under the anti-terrorism law, as you pointed out, there's little substantial evidence as of now, as we speak, to corroborate India's view that this indeed is an attack which can come from multiple vectors, be it from across the borders, a narrative which we've seen from India from time to time, as well as other, places of alarm. So I think all of this collectively speaks to the larger panic within Narendra Modi's administration, as well as his constituency, which wants to see Modi be very hard on terrorism. For a long time, terrorism has been, used as a narrative to kind of strengthen political constituencies, including for Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as well as to kind of signal and do away with even an iota of responsibility when it comes to substantiating these things as a domestic challenge. So I think that's something which is keeping the current, I'd say, fact from being established, because it does not seem entirely politically opportune in wake of the May strikes and the escalations with Pakistan as well. So there's a regional dynamic coming in, something which we've seen Narendra Modi be a lot more receptive to when it comes to his domestic appeal. Now, coming back to the disinformation part, I'll tell you a little bit about this. I think one of the reasons why I believe that the Indian government, we can have a conversation about, them having a different take from these media outlets, of course, about what Turkey and India's relationships look like. But when you look at the gravity of the claims made within them, the allegation of global terror, about logistical financial support, all of which has been rejected, I think it's in India's interest to kind of clear the air and put out a statement and say, hey, that, we kind of distance ourselves from them. So I think this tacit silence that we see right now does little to advance, I'd say, positive sentiment between both sides. But I agree with the overall idea that this is largely to do with an incident being probed domestically, which is not convincing to many observers around the board, which is why we see these multiple accusations, sometimes towards Pakistan, sometimes towards Turkey, and other sides come to the fore.
So against these Indian media claims, Turkey also underlined in that statement that it leads global anti-terror efforts through international cooperation. We also mentioned it earlier in the discussion. But Mehmet, if Indian media keeps up with this, keeps pushing this narrative, will this be more harmful for Turkey or India?
Well, I think there is, when we look at the relationship between Turkey and India, these claims or media, defamation campaigns serves neither the side. It will not serve Turkish interests, and it harms Turkish interests, of course, as Turkey receives tourists from India, but it also means that the Turkey's relationship will be severed with India, and India will suffer from that as well. So when in international relations, it's very rare that only one side wins and the other side loses. I think it's a both lose-lose situation if Indian media keeps this sort of campaigns against Turkey without any evidence-based claims. I think the problem here is that there is that domestic tension in India that is, I mean, terrorism in Pakistan, Turkey are used as scapegoats to in a way rally the public around Modi and his party, and that ideology also has a lot to do with that. Nevertheless, I think for India to be imposing or bringing up an idea that Turkey should position itself in one way or another will always backfire, because Turkey as an autonomous country can decide on its own international affairs, be it with Pakistan, be it with its position on Kashmir, which is Turkey is for the UN resolution on that and UN perspective. That is something that is accepted by the international community, and that does not serve rebuilding trust or rebuilding relationship with India. I think from when we look at that media campaign, if India wants to make its relationship better with Turkey, they need to refrain from rhetoric that fuels that type of position of the media, even if they don't explicitly blame Turkey or accuse Turkey or make allegations against Turkey. I think that the underlying tones always fuel the media and narratives and rhetoric by the politicians. So I think if India makes its position clear about Turkey, that they want to build trust, they want to build relationship, despite their differences on issues that could basically be left aside for now, I think the relationship would benefit from, that approach would benefit both sides' relationship with one another. We shouldn't forget that the problem is the heritage left behind from the colonial powers in that region. And it is time, and it is the duty also of the countries left behind to sort out that disagreement or the problem and find a way for cooperation. Otherwise, when we look at the Middle East, it's the same problem. When we look at Kashmir, it's the same problems, the heritage of colonialism or that problems left behind from that time that now we're still kept busy with rather than cooperating with one another.
Yes, and Mayor, India recently called for boycotts on Turkish products and companies. It also urged a tourism boycott. So how significant are these moves economically, or are they just symbolic?
Let me first, I would like to contribute on the question of counterterrorism. There is absolutely, I would say that there is a shared interest between India and Turkey on the issue of counterterrorism. There is no conflict between on this issue. Coming back to the issue of economic boycott, I would say that it is very unfortunate that diplomacy has left everything to public sentiments. And after having left everything to the public sentiment, I think that these calls of boycott have become very serious to the extent that some of the very important contracts have been cancelled, or many of the agreements have been taken back. This is an extremely unfortunate situation, I would say. However, my understanding is that there is a strong economic logic in India-Turkey bilateral relations. Indian companies are exporting at least $10 billion to Turkey, and Indian business need this huge market like Turkey. And Turkish business is also trying to expand its footprint in India. So sooner or later, I think that two countries would come to a point where they would like to scale back all these sentiments and resume the business anew. So in my understanding, this sentimental part, this emotional time will go away in coming months. And such boycott appeals may not last longer, in my understanding.
Yes, unfortunately, that's all the time we had. Thank you all for joining me on Straight Talk. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Zeynep Gökçe. If you've got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can find more exclusive content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.